And so all these things, obesity rates, obesity's tripled, heart disease tripled, cancer rates tripled, stroke rates tripled, type 2 diabetes, autoimmune disorders, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, autism, and so forth. These things have increased exponentially. They almost didn't exist before then. And of course, you'll have the people say that, it's just we didn't notice it before. It's okay, we just didn't notice any of the major diseases that we're seeing now. We just didn't notice it. People get over the age of 65, they just go senile. We just didn't notice it. We just didn't notice that we needed 15,000 retirement homes in a certain community. Like, we just didn't notice, and it's just like, no, of course you would notice. My great grandfather was born in 1875. He died in 1975. And he was at home the entire time. He was 100 years old. He was fully independent. And, he smoked 3 cigarettes a day and had a whiskey every day for 100 years, And, but he also golfed basically up until, he died. And, and you look at, Native Americans and so forth, and Eskimos, and, even the Native Australians, they were in, you look at the original sort of source material from the explorers. These people were insanely healthy. There's chapters written in every book about how healthy they are, and how they only ate meat, and how healthy they were, and how great they were, how old they lived, and so forth. And everyone said that, they're just saying that, they're 100. They're just saying they're 110. They put great store in these primitive populations, put great store into, great age. And it's just like, okay, in every continent, every people, always, they just, they all have a meeting, just say, this is what we're going to tell those white people. Like, no, and we know now, actually, as geneticists, that, genetically, chromosomally, our natural life expectancy is 120 years, meaning that if you stay out of your own way and just don't do something stupid, you should make it to 120 without doing anything special. And yet we're dying in our 60s and 70s. Why is that? That's literally middle-aged, and that's the thing. We're being poisoned. We're being poisoned by the things that we eat, because plants are trying to kill you. And slow poison is still poison. People, no one, bats an eye when you say, cigarettes are poisonous, they're bad for you, they're dangerous, or alcohol is a poison, and so forth, because they do. Decrease your health and decrease your life expectancy. And then make the life that you have fun for a minute, but ultimately worse for the majority of it. And that's the same with salad. We just don't realize that. But but the data is there, and and I say to people, well, why don't we know about this? And I tell them, it's just like, every botanist on earth knows this. Every single one. And there are tons of talks by different botanists and so forth, tons of papers. Just get a botany textbook. Just Botany 101. You'll see this. This is how this works, and yet we think that, salad is good for us because we've just been told it,
That's right. So is there anything in plants that is essential for us? Because I have this conversation with people quite a lot, and there's people that will say that there are certain nutrients that are only found in plants. Now, if we are deficient in them, I suppose, is it a problem? But I'm looking specifically at folate, vitamin C, and vitamin K. Is it possible to be deficient in those, not eating plants, and is that a problem?
No, yeah, short answer is no. Biologically, we are carnivores. That's what we evolved on. So definitionally, we get everything that we need from meat. Just look at the Eskimos. There are no plants to eat in the North Pole, even if they wanted to, which they don't. We also have seen from different studies one of the reports I read, one of the explorers in northern North America. It says, some of the southern ones, it was like, okay, yeah, I get it. The people living up in the snow year round, they can only eat meat, but the ones that live more, southerly, 3 months out of the year, there's, the snow thaws. And so like, surely, in his words, surely they could live off the bounty of the land, but they don't. They only ate meat. And so, even if they could, whenever they could, they still didn't want to. And, the Plains Indians in America didn't want to either. They just ate buffalo. And, they lived to be 110, 115 years old. There's plenty of reports on that. dating back into the 1800s. There's nothing in plants that we need that we can't get from meat, but there are quite a lot of things that we need in meat that we cannot get from plants. And we also, plants also come with all the poisons and toxins. So, you're looking at vitamin C, right? So there's so much that specifically comes, the reason I bring up the Eskimos a lot is because we have a lot of data on this. We had a lot of polar explorers and expeditions that went up there and studied thereir diet. There's a Harvard ethnologist. He was a polar explorer as well. And he lived with the Eskimos for just years and years and years. And he wrote a book called The Fat of the Land. I forget his name. It's a sort of a Scandinavian name. I think it's Stephenson, yeah. And he wrote the book, The Fat of the Land, and he's talking, he was like, look, this is I've never felt better in my life, and you're sort of looking into this, like, hey, this is a real thing, and they had different polar explorers and different sorts of people that went up there, and they were just like in the best health of their life when eating as the natives did. And then they'd have someone who got really sick and they were having all these sorts of problems, scurvy or whatever, and invariably they would look through their pack and they'd find that they actually like snuck in like sailor's biscuits or crackers or whatever, something plant-based, and they just took those away. And he's like, you're not eating this crap anymore, you're eating the blubber. And they would get better. So vitamin C, first of all, we don't need nearly as much of it in our diet as we think we do. All the recommended daily allowances of different sorts of things, those mostly came, were developed around World War II by oh Christ, what's his name? He's one of the guys who was actually paid off by the sugar companies. So he's a very, very famous researcher. I'm completely blanking on his name. Anyway, so he came up with these RDAs, but this was at a time when everyone was sort of eating carbs and these sort of things. So in that context, when you have a mixed diet, like, yeah, you actually need different sorts of things because you need different nutrients to process these things, like manganese. I said manganese is an essential nutrient, and you're just not going to get enough manganese from meat. Okay, and it's just like, okay, but what does manganese do? You don't, it's not enough to just say we need it. Why do we need it? What do we need it for? What does it do? Okay, well, it's actually used to process and break down sort of carbs and plants and plant-based things. Okay, but if you don't eat the plants, you don't need the manganese, right? You don't need the poison. You don't need the cure. And so that's the same thing with a vitamin C. So vitamin C actually, so it looks like, molecularly, it actually looks like a fructose molecule. It's a 5-ring chain with like a little tail that goes off of it. So it actually competes for binding sites in your gut with carbohydrates. So if you're eating carbohydrates, you're going to block out a lot of the vitamin C. So you need an overabundance of vitamin C in order to get the little bit that you need, past the carbohydrates. Also, ask yourself, what does vitamin C do? Why do we need it? Well, it staves off scurvy. Okay, that's the main thing that people talk about. It actually does other things as well. You see it in your macrophages and our first line defense cells and so forth. But it we know about it classically from scurvy because if we don't eat it, teeth, gums will bleed and all this sort of stuff, and yet mine don't. The Eskimos don't. And in fact, all the sailors before, the British were called the limeys because they had limes and so forth. And we're getting scurvy. They didn't just figure out boats then. They were sailing all over the place long before then. The Chinese were as well, and the Vikings and so forth. They were in North America, 1100 AD. But they were just eating meat. They had preserved meats and fishes and things like that. That was it. They didn't get scurvy, and so because they weren't eating the carbohydrates. So what does vitamin C do? Vitamin C, to stave off scurvy. Scurvy is a misdevelopment of your collagen. Okay, so your collagen is your connective tissue, it's your bones, your everything. It's all everything that holds everything together. It's very strong stuff. Spider webs are collagen, right? So these are formed, all right, with different sorts of proteins. Okay, and you need specific proteins hydrolyzed so that they fit together properly. And what vitamin C does is it hydrolyzes these proteins so that they can fit together, right? And if you don't have enough of these hydrolyzed proteins, it doesn't fit together right. It's loose, it's sort of junky, and that's why your gums bleed, things break down, your tissue breaks down. Okay, and this is what scurvy is. It's it's very dangerous. People die from it. It's a nasty way to go. Your body's just literally just breaking out and just bleeding, and you can't stop it. It's really not really nasty way to go. Right. So, if you're eating meat, especially, sort of like, raw meat and things like that, or, less cooked meat, you're already getting the collagen. You're already getting these pre-hydrolyzed proteins. So you don't actually need the vitamin C to do that. You've already done it. You already have collagen. You already have the precursors for collagen. And so you don't need nearly as much. And so you're not blocking it out with carbohydrates. So you're getting, more of what you're eating, and you don't need nearly as much of it. Okay. So we only need, 10 milligrams of vitamin C a day to stave off scurvy in the context of eating carbohydrates and so forth. So when you're outside that context, you need far, far less. Okay. And so vitamin K. So there's different kinds of vitamin K. Like vitamin K2 doesn't exist in plants, and so that's actually what there's a yeah. So B12, D3, and K2 don't exist in plants. You never get enough vitamin A either, because you'd have to eat 2 kilos of carrots a day to get enough vitamin A a day. That's not going to happen, and you would have to eat everything else to get all your other nutrients as well. And you're not getting the essential fatty acids. You're not getting DHA. You're not getting the very long chain fatty acids. You're not getting cholesterol. You're not getting all these other sorts of things. And the list goes on. K2 is actually really important for jaw development, teeth development, and so forth. The Eskimos and so forth, they only ate meat. They juxtaposed that with a tribe down in sort of down in the Yucatan Peninsula down in Latin America, and they who ate a lot of plant-based sort of things. Neither of these guys had dentists, right? So they're just saying, okay, what do you have? And so this was a Harvard study. And so, the dentists involved said, they looked at like something like 684, teeth in the Eskimo community. They found 2 that weren't perfect. Okay. All the rest of them were perfect. And he said that in his entire career, he had maybe seen 10 perfect teeth. These were all perfect except 2. And then you juxtapose that with the Yucatan, where they ate a lot of plants and things like that. Their teeth are just rotting out of their head. They're all misformed and misshapen and things like that. And so we actually know that now in the dentistry journals and literature and things like that. There's different stuff that goes into it, vitamin D and calcium and K1 as well. But they were saying that most of the time people were having a K2 deficiency. And if you don't have K2, your jaw doesn't grow properly, your teeth don't grow properly. And so this is actually because it actually showed that, cavemen skulls, they didn't have crooked teeth, but we have a lot of people that need braces and so forth, but that's actually not genetic. That's nutritional. That's from, lack of nutrients. Your jaw's not developing properly. And so, think about animals in the wild. They don't have crooked teeth. Right? But we do.
Nope.
And sometimes dogs and cats do. And we're feeding them something they don't naturally
That's
eat.
right.
So they get mangled teeth. But I've never seen a horse with buckled teeth. I've never seen, a lion with screwed up teeth and so forth. It's very abnormal. So when you start sort of looking at medicine and biology from that perspective, humans are carnivores, is the kind of animal we are. Things sort of fall into place more. So, you can say, we need this nutrient, and if you don't get it, you'll die. But that doesn't really line up, with experiment and the reality. Richard Feynman, the American physicist, said, it doesn't matter how brilliant your theory is, and it doesn't matter how smart you are. If it doesn't agree with experiment, it's wrong. Okay, so so we have this theory that you need plants in order to survive, and yet we have the Eskimos who have never eaten a plant. Certain of them originally never eating any plants, and they grow and raise more humans in their body, and those humans grow up and raise more humans, having never eaten anything except meat. So definitionally, there has to be everything that we need in there in the proportions that we need it. If it was even off by 1%, you'd make it one generation. That's it, because everyone would be dead from malnutrition. It wouldn't work. You couldn't do that. And this is actually why we're seeing much higher rates of miscarriage and birth defects in the vegan and vegetarian population. It's very high, actually. And that's very, very sad, because obviously these people are trying to do the best thing for themselves and for their kids. They've just been really led down the wrong path, and they're hurting their kids. And in some, and as hard as it is to say, in some cases they're killing their kids because of the miscarriage and so forth, because they're not providing the nutrients that they need, and they're exposing them to quite a lot of poisons. I've seen at least 2 stories around the world in the last year about vegan mothers whose children have died from breastfeeding. That's scary. And for a combination of whatever the combination is, whether it's there's too much toxins or not enough nutrients, or probably both.
Wow.
These kids aren't making it, and it's quite tragic, because
Mm-hmm.
these are your kids, and
no parent wants that. No matter what their ideology is, no parent wants that.
No. And most people go, I mean, there are the hardcore, like, we're not going to do anything about, we're not going to touch animals, and you can live on that, you can do that. Most people do this because they've been told that it's actually really healthy and it's really good for you. That's why most people do it. And they're trying to do what's right, and they're trying to do what's right for them. And even the people that think that, you can be just as healthy on a plant-based diet, they've been led the wrong thing as well, because you can't. You actually can't. And a lot of people take a lot of supplements and so forth. And that was actually, I was having this sort of debate with a friend of mine who was finishing up her PhD in nutrition. She was big, plant-based, everything like that. And we were just going point for point, study for study, and she couldn't get me anywhere. And she just goes, "Okay, so what supplements do you take?" And I haven't really thought about it. I was like, I don't take supplements. Like, why would I take supplements? Like, if you need, and she was like, well, of course you take supplements. Everyone has to take supplements. And then all of a sudden it hit me. It was just like, that's a perfect argument right there. If you need to take supplements just to get basic nutrition, then by definition, your diet is deficient for whatever reason. It is deficient. And so, vegans, vegetarians, they have to take tons of these things, or they get very, very sick. I mean, they'll get sick anyway because there's poison in there, but they're just not getting basic nutrition. And so if they're not taking these, and all the vegan food, they're fortified with different vitamins you just don't get in plants. Almond milk has, vitamin D, vitamin A, all these sorts of things, E. And, and so they had to do that. And that was actually when she started sort of going, like, sitting up and taking notice, like, well, wait a minute. Yeah, maybe this doesn't make sense, And, another way, I think about it is, what are we trying to do? When we eat, what are we trying to do? We're trying to build and maintain meat, so what's going to have everything that we need? Meat.
Right.
There's a lot of studies trying to figure out, how we made this big brain and all these sorts of things, this human brain originally. You need this nutrient, this nutrient, this nutrient, because we don't make these things ourselves. So we'd have to get them from our diet, and you'd have to eat this plant and this plant and this fish and this thing over there. It's just all over the place. And I remember thinking, I was just like, okay, you're missing out one food group that by definition has everything you need to grow a brain. Brains. So, exactly, you actually see this in the fossil record that, millions of years before we had, sharp stone tools, the first sort of like work stool, basically cracked a rock in half and used the sharp edge, to kill and dismember animals, was about, the oldest one we have is 3.3 million years ago. But there's actually a lot of fossil evidence showing that for millions of years before that, our ancestors were using rocks as pound stones to crack open the skulls of carrion animals so you can get at the brain. So another animal would come and kill the animal and eat it, but then we would come in and break open the skull. And so, we were figuring out ways to get our desired food source. And that's why our brains actually grew. It responded to that. And so the smarter, more clever ones are the ones that survived. And so then they started developing tools, started developing tactics. We're not going to take down a woolly mammoth with our hands, certainly not our teeth. And so we had to figure out how to scare them off a cliff. And so they'd fall down and die themselves. And then we'd go down there with our stone tools and cut them up. And that's what we did. And that's, why, our evolutionary drive was the development of our brain. And we're actually very athletic. You see a lot of these people out there, they're we're apex predators. We have no natural predators, out in the wild. And so we were able to go up, like, the Maasai in Africa. I mean, these guys, fight lions with sticks and they win. Okay. That's amazing. But they had to figure out how, tools and things like that, because they're using sticks. That's a tool, right? They actually do have to use a tool, because you're not going to go hand to hand, Hercules, excluded. But like, So that's why our brains developed, and we, developed in that way. And, because the people that, if you just have your hand, if you had your physical attributes, just allowed you to just live your life in the wild and just, pick fruit and, eat whatever was around you, you don't need to develop your brain. You have to figure something out, then you develop the way we do. And that's why we live in houses and lions don't, because they develop their teeth and their claws and their speed and their power, and we developed our brains. Okay. And that's why we are who we are. That's why we're able to have this conversation in the first place and think in abstraction, because our brains developed, to the point through hunting and trying to get this sort of thing, and then using tools, and then that sort of grew and grew and grew and grew and grew until where we are today.